In the notorious world of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, where power, loyalty, and violence reign supreme, justice often comes at a heavy price. These are tales of brutality, manipulation, and the pursuit of power as these individuals stand trial for their shocking actions. What drives these feared individuals to commit heinous crimes? Will justice prevail, or will the dark allure of the outlaw biker world continue to cast its shadow? Join us as we dive into the gripping saga of Hells Angels facing heavy punishments in the courtroom. Adam Lee Hall, a significant member of the notorious Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. In a trial unfolding in Hampton Superior Court, Hall faced 3 counts of murder along with other charges. Adam Lee Hall's story begins in Peru, Massachusetts, where he grew up amidst a backdrop of crime and violence. In this turbulent environment, Hall sought solace and belonging, eventually finding it within the ranks of the Hells Angels. For those unfamiliar, the Hells Angels are known for their distinctive logo and notorious reputation for engaging in criminal activities. With chapters spanning across the globe, this motorcycle club has instilled fear and is synonymous with lawlessness. Their activities have included drug trafficking, extortion, and various violent acts. For Hall, joining the Hells Angels wasn't merely a choice. It was a means of gaining power, respect, and protection in a world characterized by chaos. Unfortunately, Hall's involvement with the club led him down a dark path, culminating in his appearance in the courtroom facing serious charges. Throughout the trial, the truth behind Hall's alleged crimes emerged, shedding light on his troubled past and the extent of his involvement with the Hells Angels. As the proceedings unfolded, it became clear that Hall's actions had far-reaching consequences, not only for himself, but also for those affected by his alleged crimes. Hall's journey into the underworld of the Hells Angels commenced in his late teens when a trusted friend introduced him to the club. Drawn by the camaraderie and a sense of rebellion, Hall swiftly ascended the ranks, establishing himself as a formidable figure. His unwavering loyalty and readiness to execute the club's illicit deeds garnered him respect and a position of authority within the organization. As a ranking member, Hall partook in a plethora of criminal activities, ranging from drug trafficking to the illegal trade of firearms and acts of violence. The club's notorious reputation for brutality and intimidation only bolstered Hall's status within the criminal realm. He earned a reputation as a merciless enforcer, willing to go to extreme lengths to safeguard the club's interests. However, Hall's affiliation with the Hells Angels wasn't without repercussions. Law enforcement agencies, spurred by the club's nefarious activities, set their sights on dismantling the organization and prosecuting its members. Over time, Hall found himself entangled in legal battles, facing an array of charges spanning from assault to drug trafficking. Despite the gravity of these accusations, he consistently managed to evade severe consequences, largely due to the loyalty and secret nature of the Hells Angels Brotherhood. Nevertheless, the law eventually caught up with Hall. His involvement in a litany of criminal enterprises led to a high-stakes courtroom showdown where the truth behind his actions came to light. Despite his efforts to evade justice, Hall's past caught up with him, resulting in heavy punishments befitting the severity of his crimes. During this period, Hall's notoriety as a dangerous and violent individual flourished. Known for his quick temper and readiness to resort to extreme measures, he became a feared figure among those who dared to challenge the Hells Angels. Hall's deepening involvement with the club paralleled an escalation in his criminal endeavors. He became entangled in a web of violence and corruption, exploiting his position within the organization for personal gain. However, Hall's unchecked reign would eventually come to a halt. The courtroom bore witness to the culmination of his dark deeds as shocking revelations unfolded. His involvement with the Hells Angels transcended mere illegal activities within the club. He was also the architect of a series of heinous crimes that rocked the community and spelled his downfall. Motivated by a chilling determination to safeguard his own interest and maintain control over perceived threats, Hall orchestrated a sinister plot. His primary target was David Glasser, viewed as a pivotal witness capable of testifying against him. Eliminating Glasser would, in Hall's mind, ensure the concealment of his criminal exploits and shield him from accountability. However, Glasser wasn't the sole victim of Hall's calculated scheme. Edward Frampton and Robert Chadwell, innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire, met tragic ends at Hall's hands. Their brutal deaths served to eradicate any potential witnesses to his crimes, further illustrating Hall's ruthless resolve to protect his illicit empire. Hall's calculated and merciless actions showcased a complete disregard for human life, underlining his unwavering commitment to safeguarding his interests at any expense. The subsequent investigation into these atrocious murders was exhaustive, with law enforcement agencies diligently piecing together evidence to build a solid case against Hall and his accomplices. Ultimately, Hall faced 3 counts of first-degree murder and kidnapping. Testimonies from 2 of his co-defendants corroborated his role as the orchestrator of the killings, further bolstering the prosecution's case. Despite the defense's assertions of a lack of physical evidence directly linking Hall to the crimes, the jury was swayed by the overwhelming testimonies and circumstantial evidence presented by the prosecution. The motive behind these heinous acts, propelled by Hall's insatiable desire to safeguard his own interests and assert control, served as a chilling testament to the depths of his depravity. The trial of Adam Lee Hall captured widespread attention, drawing both media scrutiny and public interest. As the courtroom doors swung open, the stage was set for a dramatic showdown between the prosecution and the defense, with the fate of Hall and justice for the victims hanging in the balance. The prosecution meticulously laid out their case, presenting a compelling narrative that vividly portrayed Hall as a man consumed by a relentless drive to protect his criminal empire. His willingness to resort to extreme measures to silence potential witnesses painted a stark picture of a man devoid of remorse or conscience. The courtroom was gripped by the chilling testimonies of witnesses, especially Hall's co-defendants, who painted a vivid picture of his role in meticulously planning and executing the murders. Their accounts left little doubt about Hall's guiltiness in the tragic events that unfolded. On the defense front, attorney Alan Black spared no effort in his endeavor to cast doubt on the prosecution's case. Black vigorously argued that there existed no tangible evidence linking Hall to the crimes. He further contended that the testimonies provided by the co-defendants were unreliable. Black's strategy aimed to instill reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors, striving for a verdict of not guilty for his client. As the trial progressed, the tension within the courtroom became palpable. The families of the victims, alongside law enforcement officials, awaited with beating hearts the outcome that would determine the fate of Adam Lee Hall. After days of intense deliberation, the moment of reckoning arrived. The jury, having carefully considered the evidence presented, reached a decision. The courtroom fell silent as the foreperson of the jury stood up to deliver the verdict. All eyes were fixed on Hall, who maintained a stoic demeanor in the defendant's chair. The solemn voice of the foreperson resounded, pronouncing Hall guilty on 3 counts of murder, along with other charges including kidnapping and intimidating a witness. Hall's demeanor remained devoid of emotion as the verdict was delivered, a stark contrast to the flood of emotions that swept through the courtroom. For the families of the victims, who had endured years of pain and anguish, there was a sense of closure knowing that justice had finally been served. The courtroom erupted into a whirlwind of emotions. Tears streamed down the faces of the victims' families, their pent-up sorrow mingling with a profound sense of relief. Law enforcement officers, whose unwavering dedication had led to this moment, embraced each other, and their efforts were finally vindicated. After carefully considering all the evidence and the profound impact of Hall's actions, the judge pronounced a sentence that reverberated through the courtroom. Adam Lee Hall was condemned to spend the remainder of his days behind bars, with no possibility of parole. Not 1, not 2, but 3 consecutive life sentences were handed down, a testament to the gravity of his crimes. The evidence presented during the trial laid bare a level of depravity and disregard for human dignity that surpassed anything the judge had encountered before. The severity of Hall's actions left an indelible mark on the courtroom, serving as a chilling reminder of the consequences of such heinous deeds. Next up, we have Maurice Bouchier, the former president of the Quebec Nomads chapter of the infamous Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, was a figure synonymous with violence, power struggles, and an insatiable thirst for control. His tenure as the chapter president was characterized by a reign of terror, fueled by organized crime and drug trafficking. Boucher's quest for dominance led him to establish a formidable presence within the criminal underworld, particularly in the realm of drug trade. His ambition to monopolize the drug market under the banner of the Hells Angels fueled widespread violence and bloodshed, earning him a reputation as a ruthless leader. Entering the ranks of the Hells Angels in the late 1980s, Boucher quickly rose through the ranks, buoyed by his charisma and leadership prowess. His ascent garnered him both respect and fear among his fellow gang members. However, it was his involvement in drug trafficking that truly solidified his standing within the criminal hierarchy. The early 1990s witnessed Quebec embroiled in a brutal turf war, famously known as the Quebec Biker War. Boucher's Nomads chapter of the Hells Angels found themselves locked in a deadly struggle against the rival Rock Machine biker gang. Both factions vied relentlessly for control over the lucrative drug trade, leading to a prolonged and violent conflict that ravaged the streets. Throughout this tumultuous period, Boucher's iron-fisted leadership and unwavering determination to assert Hells Angels' dominance cemented his notoriety in the annals of organized crime history. His actions during this time would leave an indelible mark on Quebec's criminal landscape for years to come. The streets of Montreal became a battleground during the height of the Quebec Biker War, with innocent bystanders often caught in the crossfire of rival gangs. In this chaotic environment, Maurice Boucher's actions earned him a notorious reputation for ruthlessness and cunning. He operated with a calculated precision that kept him consistently ahead of law enforcement. Boucher's involvement in drug trafficking extended far beyond the borders of Quebec. He cultivated connections with various criminal organizations, including the infamous MAAIIAA. His ambition was clear: to establish a Hells Angels monopoly over the drug trade, and he spared no effort in pursuing this goal. What set Boucher apart was his disciplined approach to criminal activities. While others in the underworld indulged in vices like drugs and alcohol, Boucher remained focused and clear-minded, always keeping his eyes on the prize. Despite his criminal pursuits, he lived a lavish lifestyle, owning properties in Mexico and indulging in his love for opera and concerts. Boucher's influence transcended the biker world. He maintained connections with former police officers, leveraging their assistance to further his criminal enterprises. Additionally, he employed a Haitian bodyguard named Gregory Picasso Woolley, renowned for his skills as an assassin, further solidifying Boucher's formidable presence in the criminal underworld. Throughout his reign, Boucher exuded an aura of power and control, instilling fear in those who dared to oppose him. Maurice Boucher's intricate network of informants within the police force granted him unparalleled access to information and enabled him to manipulate the justice system to his advantage. A true master manipulator, Boucher had insiders feeding him crucial intel, allowing him to evade capture and outmaneuver law enforcement at every turn. His adeptness at exploiting the vulnerabilities of the justice system kept him way ahead in the relentless game of cat and mouse. The ramifications of Boucher's involvement in organized crime and drug trafficking were profound. The drug trade, under his reign, unleashed waves of violence and bloodshed, leaving devastation in its wake. However, despite his seemingly invincible grip on power, the tide would soon turn. While violence was no stranger to Boucher, it was his orchestrating of the murders of 2 Quebec prison officers that reverberated through the criminal underworld and beyond. Motivated by his desire to destabilize the justice system and thwart plea bargains for Hells Angels members, Boucher took a calculated step, targeting those associated with the prison system. This brazen act of violence struck fear into the hearts of all who dared to oppose him, signaling the lengths to which Boucher was willing to go in pursuit of his ambitions. Yet, as history has shown, even the most formidable figures are not immune to the consequences of their actions. The downfall of Maurice Boucher, once a titan of organized crime, was imminent. Under the cover of darkness, the first murder orchestrated by Maurice Boucher unfolded with chilling efficiency. Boucher's cohorts, carrying out his orders, ambushed an unsuspecting prison officer as he journeyed home. The violence was swift and merciless, leaving no room for mercy. It served as a stark warning. Crossing Boucher meant paying the ultimate price. The very fabric of the justice system felt under siege, with the specter of retribution looming over those sworn to uphold the law. Initially arrested and charged with attempted murder and first-degree murder, Boucher managed to evade conviction in 1998, thanks to an acquittal by a jury. However, this reprieve was short-lived. An appeal court later dismissed the acquittal, leading to Boucher's rearrest. Determined to bring him to justice, law enforcement launched a relentless investigation. Despite overwhelming evidence against him, Boucher's manipulation of the justice system, coupled with his network of informants, facilitated another acquittal in 1998. The courtroom's reaction was one of disbelief, with some even cheering for the man behind such heinous acts. Boucher, once deemed untouchable, now found himself in the clutches of law enforcement. News of Boucher's arrest spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through his associates and rivals alike. The void left by his apprehension left many scrambling to fill the power vacuum he left behind. Boucher's capture marked a pivotal moment in the ongoing battle against organized crime. It dealt a significant blow to the Hells Angels and their stranglehold on the drug trade. However, the fight against criminal enterprises was far from over, signaling the beginning of a new chapter in the ongoing struggle for justice. Boucher's formidable influence continued to cast a long shadow, and the repercussions of his actions reverberated for years to come. His trial became a highly anticipated spectacle, with the nation's gaze fixed firmly upon the courtroom. The weight of evidence against him was staggering, and the prosecution presented a compelling case. However, Boucher, with his charisma and manipulation skills honed over years, fought back fiercely. His network of informants within the police force granted him unparalleled access to information, enabling him to twist the justice system to his advantage. The courtroom transformed into a battleground, with the prosecution and defense locked in a relentless struggle. As the trial unfolded, tension hung thick in the air, filled with dramatic moments as evidence was presented and witnesses took the stand. The fate of Boucher hung carefully in the balance, captivating the entire nation, which held its breath awaiting the outcome. Boucher's trial etched itself into the annals of Canadian history as one of the most high-profile cases. The courtroom brimmed with drama and intrigue, showcasing a battle of wits between the prosecution and defense. In the end, justice prevailed. Boucher was found guilty on multiple charges, including the orchestrating of the murders of 2 Quebec prison officers. The courtroom erupted into applause as the verdict was read, marking the end of Maurice Boucher's reign of terror. He was sentenced to 3 life sentences at Canada's only supermax prison, a fitting punishment for the man responsible for so much pain and suffering. However, Boucher's time behind bars was far from easy. He faced numerous assassination attempts from rival gangs and fellow inmates seeking revenge. Despite these dangers, Boucher relied on his cunning and survival instincts to navigate the treacherous waters of prison life. Despite his resilience, Boucher's criminal empire began to crumble. In 2014, the Hells Angels expelled him from the gang, severing his ties to the organization he once led. This expulsion dealt a symbolic blow to his power and influence, signaling the end of an era. Moving on, we have the case of Rodney Rollnesses, a former member of the infamous Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, whose journey through the courtroom left many astounded. Rodney Rollness, once a figure feared within the ranks of the Hells Angels, encountered a brutal dose of karma within the confines of the courtroom. His involvement in the murder of Michael Walsh, coupled with a lengthy rap sheet of criminal activities, finally caught up with him. Renowned for his unwavering allegiance to the Hells Angels, Rollness was a man who would go to any lengths to safeguard the interests of the club. The turning point occurred on a fateful day, July 21, 2001, when Rollness's participation in a particularly heinous act of violence sent shockwaves reverberating throughout the community. Michael Walsh, seemingly an innocent bystander, tragically found himself ensnared in the crosshairs of Rollness's wrath. While the exact motive behind the murder remains shrouded in mystery, it is believed to be intricately linked to the ongoing criminal activities of the Hells Angels. The tragic loss of Walsh's life sent shockwaves through his loved ones, leaving them shattered and seeking justice. As the investigation unfolded, the full extent of Rodney Rollness's involvement in the murder began to surface. Witnesses stepped forward, shedding light on the events leading up to that fateful day. It became evident that Rollness played a central role in orchestrating the violent act that claimed Walsh's life. Charged with extortion, murder, and robbery, Rollness found himself at the center of a compelling prosecution case. The evidence presented linked him directly to the murder, painting a damning picture of his involvement. Testimonies from witnesses painted a chilling portrait of Rollness's cold-blooded nature and his readiness to resort to violence in service of the Hells Angels. One witness, choosing to remain anonymous for fear of retaliation, recounted a disturbing conversation with Rollness. According to the witness, Rolness had confided his plans to eliminate anyone threatening the criminal empire of the Hells Angels. Walsh, it seemed, had become a target due to his knowledge of the club's illicit activities. Furthermore, the investigation uncovered a complex web of connections between Rolness and other members of the Hells Angels. It became apparent that Walsh's murder was not an isolated incident, but rather a calculated move within a larger scheme, orchestrated by Rolness and his associates. As the trial progressed, the chilling revelations surrounding Rolness's involvement in Walsh's murder underscored the ruthless lengths to which he and the Hells Angels were willing to go to protect their criminal enterprise. The pursuit of justice for Walsh's tragic death became not only a quest for closure for his loved ones, but also a pivotal moment in dismantling the dark forces behind such senseless acts of violence. It became apparent that the murder of Michael Walsh was not an isolated incident, but rather a calculated move aimed at maintaining control and instilling fear within the criminal underworld. As the trial approached, tensions soared. The Hells Angels, renowned for their culture of silence and intimidation, spared no effort to obstruct the course of justice. Witnesses faced threats and intimidation, yet despite the pervasive atmosphere of fear, several courageous individuals stepped forward to testify against Rolness and his cohorts. Inside the courtroom, a fierce battle ensued. The prosecution presented a formidable array of evidence against Rolness, meticulously piecing together a mountain of incriminating proof. The jury listened intently as witnesses recounted the events leading up to the murder, vividly portraying Rolness's central role in the crime. The prosecution argued that Rolness's actions not only reflected his own violent nature, but also served as a damning indictment of the Hells Angels' criminal enterprise. Throughout the trial, Rolness vehemently maintained his innocence, alleging that he was being framed by drug-addicted witnesses, corrupt law enforcement officers, and a biased judge. However, the weight of evidence against him was overwhelming. The prosecution painstakingly constructed a timeline of events, leaving little room for doubt regarding Rolness's guilt. As the trial drew to a close, the jury deliberated for 13 days, meticulously weighing the evidence presented before them. The fate of Rolness hung in the balance, with the ease of the nation fixed anxiously on the courtroom, awaiting the long-awaited verdict that would deliver justice for Michael Walsh and bring closure to his grieving loved ones. After a tense period of deliberation, the momentous verdict was finally reached. Rodney Rolness was found guilty on multiple counts, including the racketeering act of murder in connection with the death of Michael Walsh. As the sentencing phase commenced, the prosecution stepped forward, presenting a compelling argument for the harshest possible punishment. Emphasizing the heinous nature of Rolness's crimes, the prosecution underscored the devastating impact it had on the victim's family and the wider community. They argued that a lenient sentence would send the wrong message, failing to adequately address the severity of Rolness's actions. In contrast, Rolness's defense team pleaded for leniency, painting a portrait of a man who had been led astray by the influence of the Hells Angels. They portrayed Rolness as a product of his environment, a pawn in a larger criminal enterprise. Urging the judge to consider the possibility of rehabilitation, they advocated for a chance for Rolness to turn his life around. As the courtroom braced for the judge's decision, the contrasting arguments echoed through the chamber, each vying for the judge's attention and consideration. The weight of Rolness's crimes hung heavy in the air, and the outcome of the sentencing would not only determine his fate, but also serve as a reflection of the justice system's response to such egregious acts of violence. Despite the defense's impassioned pleas, the judge remained steadfast, unmoved by their arguments. Citing the gravity of the crimes committed and the imperative to protect society from individuals like Rodney Rolness, the judge delivered a sentence that reverberated through the court, room like thunder. Rodney Rolness was condemned to spend the remainder of his days behind bars. As the judge's words echoed, a tidal wave of emotions swept over those present. The victim's family, who had endured years of pain and anguish, found solace in the knowledge that Rolness would never again taste freedom. Their long-awaited justice had finally been served. Rolness, on the other hand, erupted in a torrent of anger and disbelief. He furiously protested, accusing the government of orchestrating a sham case against him. He labeled the witnesses as drug-addicted liars, the police as corrupt, and the judge as biased. "I've heard enough lies from these people," he exclaimed, claiming he was railroaded and wrongfully sentenced. However, his impassioned protests fell upon deaf ears as the court remained resolute in its decision. In the wake of the judge's ruling, a palpable sense of finality settled over the courtroom. Rolness's fate had been sealed, and despite his protests and claims of innocence, he would now face the consequences of his actions. As the gavel fell, signaling the end of the trial, the echoes of justice reverberated through the chambers, leaving behind a sobering reminder of the price of crime and the unwavering pursuit of justice. Next, we have the case of Caius Vaiovis, a notorious member of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang, whose menacing appearance, adorned with implanted horns and a 666 tattoo, instilled fear in many during the early 2010s. Vaiovis, along with his two accomplices, orchestrated a heinous and sadistic crime in the tranquil town of Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Their victims, David Glasser, Edward Frampton, and Robert Chadwell, were unsuspecting individuals lured into a remote location under the guise of a drug deal. Little did they know that they were stepping into a nightmare. At the secluded spot, Vaiovis and his associates unleashed their sadistic tendencies, subjecting the victims to unimaginable torture. The details of the crime are too gruesome to recount, but suffice it to say, the level of violence perpetrated was beyond comprehension. The bodies of the victims were mutilated, serving as a horrifying testament to the darkness that consumed Vaiovis. The motive behind these brutal murders remains murky, but it is believed to be linked to a dispute over drugs and money. Vaiovis and his cohorts were willing to go to any lengths to safeguard their criminal empire, even if it meant snuffing out innocent lives. The sheer callousness and lack of remorse exhibited by Vaiovis during these acts are chilling, casting a dark shadow over the community of Pittsfield. The impact of these crimes reverberated profoundly throughout Pittsfield, a town known for its peaceful atmosphere. The brutality that unfolded within its borders shattered the tranquility, leaving residents shocked and traumatized. The devastating aftermath of Vaiovis's actions tore families apart and cast a pall of fear and unease over the once tranquil streets. The shockwaves of his crimes reverberated far and wide, leaving an indelible scar on the collective consciousness of the community. In response, law enforcement agencies swiftly mobilized to bring Vaiovis and his accomplices to justice. The ensuing investigation was marked by meticulousness, with no stone left unturned. The evidence against Vaiovis was overwhelming, solidifying the belief that he was the mastermind behind these heinous crimes. Charged with first-degree murder, witness intimidation, and kidnapping, Vaiovis's apprehension only served to heighten the sense of dread surrounding him. Vaiovis's sinister appearance, characterized by implanted horns and a 666 tattoo on his face, further fueled the public's perception of him as a cold-blooded killer. It seemed as though he relished in his reputation, taunting both authorities and the public with his menacing presence. The trial that ensued was nothing short of a spectacle of horror and disbelief. The courtroom buzzed with gasps and murmurs as the prosecution laid bare the details of Vaiovis's crimes. It painted a chilling portrait of a man consumed by darkness, seemingly devoid of remorse or humanity. As the proceedings unfolded, it became evident that Vaiovis and his accomplices operated as a cohesive unit, their actions appearing as if orchestrated by a single malevolent entity. The prosecution emphasized that the case was not solely about Vaiovis's individual actions, but rather about the collective depravity of all three perpetrators. Throughout the trial, Vaiovis displayed a chilling lack of remorse for his heinous crimes. With a sinister grin etched on his face, he seemed to revel in the attention, projecting an aura of invincibility. It was evident that he considered himself above the laws that govern society. However, justice would not be denied. The jury grappled with the sheer brutality of Vaiovis's crimes as they deliberated his fate. In the sentencing phase of the trial, the courtroom was gripped by drama once again. The prosecution called for the death penalty, arguing that Vaiovis posed a significant danger to society and warranted the ultimate punishment. They portrayed him as a man who took pleasure in violence, displaying a blatant disregard for human life. Conversely, the defense pleaded for mercy, presenting Vaiovis's troubled upbringing and challenging environment as mitigating factors. They sought to evoke a sympathy from the jury, highlighting evidence of his difficult childhood. However, Vaiovis's demeanor only made their task more challenging. He exhibited no remorse and adamantly refused any plea deals, further cementing the image of an unrepentant and dangerous individual. As the courtroom drama unfolded, the question of Veiovis's fate hung in the balance, symbolizing the clash between justice and mercy. Despite his defiance and lack of remorse, the jury's decision would ultimately determine the course of his future, and whether he would face the ultimate consequences for his heinous actions. After thorough deliberation, the judge delivered a sentence that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Veiovis was condemned to life in prison without the possibility of parole, not once, but 3 times over. The pronouncement of this severe penalty was met with resounding applause, signifying the delivery of long-awaited justice. For the families of the victims, it offered a semblance of closure, reassuring them that their loved ones would be remembered and that Veiovis would never again roam free to inflict harm. However, Veiovis remained seemingly undisturbed by the gravity of his sentence. As he was escorted away in handcuffs, a smirk played upon his lips, and he muttered obscenities under his breath. It was evident that he still clung to his delusion of invincibility, unshaken even in the face of a life sentence behind bars. Despite his outward display of defiance, the verdict served as a sobering reminder that justice had prevailed, and that Veiovis would be held accountable for his monstrous deeds. Locked away from society for the rest of his days, he would be forced to confront the consequences of his actions, serving as a cautionary tale against the horrors of unchecked malevolence.